Kiljander, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here with you in this online conference. And actually, we already had a plan to set this up in the Yousician office in Helsinki, but due to this coronavirus outbreak, we are now attending from our home offices or from any other safe locations. So a brief intro for myself. I lead a team of great product designers, marketing designers at Yousician. And if you're wondering about this specific picture, we arrange an annual offsite for our teams in Helsinki. We also have a small team in New York. So we have some fun in some warm location. And this was November last year in Las Palmas. We were working for a couple of weeks. We did some we were planting some trees. We also did an agile sandcastle exercise, and more about the sandcastles later. So some of you may know Yousician, and now I need to be able to, yes, now you should be able to see my second slide. So Yousician, we are a 10-year-old startup in Helsinki, so we are almost like a pre-teenager. The company was founded with the name Ovelin. It was part of Startup Sauna's accelerator program in the Aalto University. And our mission is to make musicality as common as literacy. So we make the world's best guitar learning app called Yousician. You can also learn to play the piano, you can play the ukulele, you can play the bass guitar, and you can learn singing with the app. And we have some tens of millions downloads for that app. Then we make the world's best instrument tuning app called Guitar Tuner, and that one has over 100 million downloads. So there's quite a big number of people using our products and services out there. We have roughly about 100 employees, most of them in Helsinki, a small team in New York. Roughly half of them are developers, so that's backend, that's app development, some DSP, digital signal processing, web development. And then we have roughly 10 designers in our growing design team. So how do we make this all work? So we have designers, we have multiple development teams. So like with most other development organizations right now, all of those teams are following some agile frameworks or practices. There's Scrum, there's Kanban, there's XP, there's release trains, there's continuous integration, all that stuff. And I've been trying to figure out how this works, how designers and developers can collaborate efficiently and effectively for a rather long time. So I joined Yousician last year. And when I was interviewing design stakeholders in the company, quite so many were raising the question of collaboration. So basically kind of what about glitches that are caused by manual handoffs between the designers and developers? Those were topics that were raised. And it's quite familiar because before Yousician, I worked at F-Secure. I was a design lead for close to 10 years. And F-Secure makes cybersecurity. I was on the consumer cybersecurity business unit. We were developing products like antivirus apps, VPN. If you've heard about Freedom, that's what they did. We did identity protection, password management, secure Wi-Fi. And we did a big reorganization roughly 3 years ago at F-Secure. And one of the big drivers in that reorg was to streamline and improve the collaboration between the design team and the development teams, so that we'd have the development projects staffed with the appropriate design competencies, and design would not be seen as bottleneck in the overall product creation work. It's kind of interesting because I'm not sure if it's this way, maybe this is a bit provocative now, but since most of the biggest teams are development teams, they usually think that designers are the bottleneck. It's never the other way, that designers would think that developers are the bottleneck. But even before F-Secure, I worked in product creation in a company called Nokia. Well, half of Finland was working for Nokia at that time. So back in the days when Nokia was still developing its own mobile operating systems, and our plan was to develop the world's best smartphone platform based on Linux, and then build phones with the software. And this was a massive undertaking for Nokia. And to make it happen, we knew that we had to make the design work and development work happen in parallel, super smoothly in an agile way. We had heard about agile, and we had our context. We had very many unknowns. So kind of the hardware was new, the software was new, the partners were new. We had to build an app ecosystem and all that. So if you look at these kind of product categories, they seem to be quite different, but from a product creation process perspective, they are pretty similar. They share the same challenges. So how to do the design work, how to do the development work, so that the whole organization is working efficiently, effectively, allowing people to do their best work and also learn new things while they are doing that. So back in the Nokia days, we work with some pretty smart software thinkers, and they help us to shape our way of working and build those kind of processes and practices between the designers and developers. And now comes a bit of provocation. So some of you may have heard about the Agile software development movement, or even the manifesto for Agile software development. So back in 2001, there was a developer called Alistair Coburn, and he invited 17 of his smart developer friends to a ski resort in Utah. And they produced in that workshop that lasted for a couple of days something they called the manifesto for Agile software development. They wrote 12 Agile principles. And even though they were developers, they sort of realized that they need the business people to do their work. So like one of the principles among these 12 was that close daily cooperation between business people and developers is required. However, they mostly ignored design in their work. And I learned to know Alistair later. He was consulting for Nokia, and I asked him that, hey, kind of why didn't you include design as a profession or designers into this work? And he kind of admitted that they completely forgot, or they completely ignored. They sort of remember that they need the business people. And being developers, guys, they were guys only. There were no female attendees in the gathering, so they just ignored design. So then at Nokia, we were a big organization, huge company that makes a lot of software. We heard about this great new thing called Agile. We decided to go live with Agile, and we had a big design team working in the organization. So then we were kind of stumbling a bit. So we are going Agile. Agile doesn't say anything about design. We have these designers. How do we make this work? So what I had heard and learned earlier, and my thinking also was shaped by a guy called Tim Brown from IDEO. So he had presented around the same time his view to design thinking. So he did not invent design thinking, but he kind of popularized it with this kind of a Venn diagram. So basically kind of this sort of a human-centered approach to innovation. It draws from the designer's toolkit. It integrates the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And to me, this made sense. And this was kind of how we were building the organization. So then we wanted to see how this can coexist with Agile. So we were able to kind of get something done, presumably, because 2 years later, I went to the Scan Agile Conference. This was 2009, 2 years after we started the Amigo work. And I was sharing our experiences, how to integrate UX design work with Agile software development. And there's some of this is still pretty valid. I had more slides. You can find those slides actually in SlideShare. I had kind of a slide. This was kind of the presentation of the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this was the good slide. So assigning designers to work in Agile Scrum teams, and establishing a continuous user testing and feedback loop mechanisms, kind of like treating user testing like quality assurance. And using appropriate levels of prototyping fidelity. You don't need super detailed prototypes every time. Many times it's definitely more relevant to get the testing done super fast. And we had to do a lot of kind of a marketing materials production, and eventually we decided to branch that to a completely separate team without kind of a burdening the product designers with that work. And there were lots of, Nokia being a huge organization, there were lots of helpers around our teams. So eventually, we just learned to say no even to the vice presidents and their spouses, who had lots of interesting ideas what we should be doing. And actually, even a bit before, around the time when we started the MeeGo design and development work, we had the opportunity to work with this same Alistair Coburn, who had kicked off the Agile Manifesto work. So he came and he was helping Nokia to kind of improve the software development practices, and we were able to arrange a workshop with him. So designers were learning from him of Agile, and he was learning from the designers of how to do design work. And actually we produced, this was 2007, we produced a manifesto for Agile UX design. This was 13 years ago. Wow. And it's spiritually, it's quite similar to the manifesto for Agile software development. Obviously, Alistair was kind of influencing our thinking a bit. There's an interesting element, by the way, here. You can see that 13 years ago, 10 years ago, slides were not widescreen like they are today. So yeah, the Agile movement in general nowadays, it's full of different tools and frameworks. I was doing some research yesterday when finalizing these slides, and I calculated 33 different Agile frameworks. And one that has been developed for huge, massive global enterprises, big organizations, it's called Scaled Agile Framework, or SAFE is the acronym. And even SAFE went kind of to the design side, or decided to embrace design last year. So they added design thinking and lean UX to the SAFE 5.0 version. This is, to a small organization, possibly a bit of on the overkill side. And myself, being a kind of a pragmatic person, what I've been thinking, I wanted to crystallize that in a kind of like a list of simple things you can hang on the wall and kind of keep in mind. And this is obviously kind of a context specific. I've been working in product companies, and I know that kind of the context, the situation, for example, in an agency is different. So these may not completely apply to your setup, but Agile in general, you shouldn't treat Agile like a dogma. So if you read something from a book, you need to be able to apply that in your own organization, to your own product, to your own team structure and customer requirements. So what I've learned in all these kind of my current job and the 2 jobs before this one, staffing the designers in these Agile development teams, they may be called teams or squads. That's the way to make the designer to developer collaboration to work. They need to share the same objectives. Designers need to be joining the daily stand-ups of those teams. We've been running design sprints both at Yousician and F-Secure. They are really good in building this cross-disciplinary commitment. You need to have the product manager or the product owner, whichever title or name you have for that role, developers, architects, someone from customer support or customer care, and the designers. There needs to be a facilitator who knows how to facilitate the week or 2 weeks. But it's really good because kind of when it's over and people get back to the daily work and the sprint cadence, then a lot of the kind of communication and shared understanding is already in place. Then what I learned about usability testing, software developers, they take QA super seriously. And I think it's easy if you can ride on that when it comes to user testing, injecting the user testing or validation to the overall product creation process. So kind of a feature cannot be released until the QA is done. So if usability testing or user validation is part of that, then semi-automatically it gets done as well. Obviously, it needs to be resourced. Then there's a lot of talk about design systems nowadays. Many times they are just kind of glorified names for UI component libraries. They are definitely good and useful because you can establish a level of consistency, make your designs coherent. If you have a bigger company, you have a number of products and a number of touch points and platforms, the design system will ease your pain tremendously. Overall, in the workflow across design, development, maybe even product management, avoiding manual handoffs. So Jira, Confluence, other tools like Zeppelin or Figma definitely are good because kind of anytime you inject a piece of manual work in a handoff, there will be errors, and those errors need to be fixed, and time needs to be spent on fixing those ones. Then I said kind of in the first one that staffing the designers in the development teams, it's really good, but also then you need to have a backbone for the design function, be it a team or a chapter, to build the design consistency, develop the design system, and also develop the design talent. You need to hire new designers. And many times software engineering managers may not really have the skills required to hire great designers. So there needs to be someone else who's hiring the great designers and kind of coaching the designers. And sometimes I hear from kind of agile thinkers that the designers should have no other work than the teamwork or the sprint work. But there's also things like kind of insights gathering, trend spotting, foresight, or future concept development and exploration. And usually that doesn't really fit into the cadence of the agile development sprints. So you need to build a mechanism where that work can happen outside the daily grind in the development teams. So yeah, that was it. So thank you everyone for joining us, listening to me. And I'd like to remind you that we are hiring in Helsinki. There's some pretty cool positions. Please go and check those out. You can find me, for example, in LinkedIn. You can find these slides at SlideShare. And then the sandcastle on the first slide, the Agile experiment. One of our Agile coaches, Alexander Elhost, wrote a really good piece on Medium about what we did, why we did it, and what we learned about that. 20 years ago, I attended a similar exercise. It was run by some Danes software developers, and obviously because they were Danes, we used Legos, but that was 20 years ago, and there was no sand. But hey, thank you, and now I'm ready for questions.